it's been an amazing experience for both of us, but it's also very obvious that like we would have needed to change the format in some form eventually.
Yeah. Go back and listen to this episode again. The episode you just listened to. Go back and hear us talk about like smartphones.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Android Police podcast. My name is Daniel Bader.
My name is Will Sattelberg.
This week on the show, we're going through all of the announcements from Google's Android show, which was really quick. I mean, it was like a 20-minute presentation on YouTube a week before the I/O keynote. But there was a lot announced, and Will, you covered all of it on Android Police. We're going to go through a little bit about Android 16, Material 3 Expressive, a couple of other small features like Gemini coming to everything, and anything else that wasn't really talked about during the show. The S25 Edge is official. It's in people's hands. I assume you have one.
I do not have one.
Okay, you're lucky then. And then if we have time, we'll talk about how Uber just reinvented public transit, which is a thing that actually happened, and it's something that I just want to talk about it because it's fascinating to me that the privatization of public transit is something that ostensibly people are comfortable with.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's only coming to the biggest cities in North America, so it won't impact anybody truly. All right, where should we start? Let's start with I/O. Let's start with the Android show. So this was, I guess, Google's way of getting ahead of the criticism that Android is never mentioned on the I/O keynote anymore, that the I/O keynote has basically been supplanted or taken over by AI and Gemini in particular. But I like this format. It was basically an Apple-style infomercial, but for Android. It was over and done with in like 20 minutes. And I think it got through like the major topics pretty efficiently. So let's start with the first one, which is Material 3 Expressive. We talked about that a lot last week, but now that it's official, now that there are supporting documentation, what do we know about it?
Well, we know it's not coming with the initial stable Android 16 release, which I think we theorized last week because we hadn't seen it in a beta yet. It would not be there in the June launch of Android 16. That ended up being true. Otherwise, it looked a lot like what we saw in the leaks, which makes sense because it was their blog post that leaked. I do still think like seeing it in motion kind of helps a lot because it's not just kind of new typography and new ways of displaying information, but it's really animated. It's bouncy and it's springy, which I'm going to pretend is a different thing than bouncy. And it's trying to feel a little bit more responsive to the way your fingers interact with Android on whatever phone you have or tablet. And I've warmed up to it a little bit. Not that I was negative about it at first, but obviously hung up a little bit on some of the leaked renders. But in general, I do think it looks good, and it's the kind of redesign I like, where it is still, it's very in touch with what came before. We're not going from Android 4.0 ice cream sandwich to Android 4.1, where it's like, okay, forget the Tron thing. Like, we didn't do that. Pretend we didn't do that. It feels like a natural evolution of Material U and the language we started seeing Google implement on Pixel devices with Android 12.
Yeah. I think this is, I don't know if people are who are listening to this remember, but there was a project around the release of Jelly Bean, Android 4.1, called Project Butter. And it was designed basically to make Android more responsive. So at the time, Android had gone through a massive visual overhaul with 4.0, right? The Hollow introduction, and then there was another update with 4.1. But Project Butter was basically built around transitioning Android to a touch-first experience. And obviously at that point, Android had been touch first for many years, right? It got
Yeah.
introduced it was first built in 2005. The first public release was 2007, but it was designed for BlackBerry style phones because at the time of its inception, that's the user interface that was dominating mobile devices. And it took many, many years for the fundamental back end to convert over to a more performant infrastructure. And a lot of what happened with this release on with Project Butter was that it was just designed to make the interface feel like when you touch the screen, it was going to respond to you in a predictable and performant way. Right at the time, GPUs were becoming a little bit more powerful. The OS was able to tap into that power. And that hasn't been something that we've really spoken about in many years, right? Android has not felt janky since probably like, I don't know, Android 7, Android 8.
Although, can I interject because we're not going to talk about the Razer Ultra. We can if you want to,
I
but
do
my
want
review's
to
not.
talk about it a little bit.
We can touch it on it during our second segment, I think. But my review's going up this weekend. I noticed it when I picked up last year's Razer recently, and then I noticed it again on this one. Something about the way Motorola's current skin on top of Android runs, like, feels very laggy and unresponsive to my touch, specifically, or I guess I should say, especially when scrolling. And the only way I was able to fix it was by like forcing the display to run at its max refresh rate of 144 hertz, like on the default, like out of box. Oh, like dynamically adjust as you need. It felt so bad under my finger. I don't know what they're doing, but it threw me back right to the days that you're talking about where Android would feel a little bit janky as you were doing normal things that you would expect not to feel janky under your finger.
Right. Maybe at some point we need like a performance and graphics mode
We
equivalent
might.
for smartphones, but I mean we shouldn't need it. I was
Yeah.
joking. But like what's unclear to me is with something like Android and Google's relationship to its partners, when Google releases a new design language like Material 3 Expressive
Yeah.
and says it will launch first on Pixel later this year and roll out to our partner devices later on, right? You can imagine that the negotiations with companies like Samsung and Oppo are very different than the ones with Motorola and Sony, because the ones with Sony and Motorola and all the other smaller companies like that don't really want to modify much of like the core Android code base is just like, here, this is our best practice, you go implement it. With Samsung, as I said last week, Samsung's got opinions, right?
Yeah.
And Oppo has
And we're,
opinions, and a
and we're
lot
going to
of
talk about those opinions in a bit.
right, and a lot of those opinions are, what is Apple doing these days? And what's
Yeah.
really interesting to look at the sort of style board, if you think of like the launch portal for Material 3 Expressive as like a Pinterest style board,
Yeah.
it looks absolutely nothing like modern iOS. It is very, very different. And maybe Android or maybe iOS 19 will introduce some of those same things. There are rumors to that. But what I'm unclear about is what a Samsung or an Oppo or like even a OnePlus or a Nothing, right? Which try still to this day to differentiate from core Pixel and
Yeah.
what we consider to be stock Android, what they're going to do in order to incorporate some of these best practices. Now, obviously, there are some things about Material 3 Expressive that go hand in hand with Android 16, like live activities,
Yeah.
which are coming to the overall operating system.
Speaking of, it's like the one iOS thing in this announcement where it's like almost everything about Material 3 Expressive is unique and like very very modern Google. And I'm not even, it's not even a critique. Like, I think live activities in iOS are a great idea. Like Apple was right. That proved to be like a thing. It was a smart thing to put on the lock screen or to have always active on your display around the dynamic island. And I like that Google and other OEMs, because like we've seen Samsung do similar things, but this will certainly be the best because it's going to be at the OS level. It's a smart way to handle like notifications that involve timing and like delivery or anything like that. Like I'm happy to see this here.
Yeah. And again, even if this is just a very minor aesthetic change with a focus on taking advantage of the latest performance improvements of modern Android phones to make everything feel smoother and bouncier and springier and all the other synonyms that we can think of, like that's probably fine.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that we mentioned last week is this won't really impact a lot of people at first because it's coming to the Pixel lineup. But when updates to Google's core apps are released, that's when the major impact will be felt, right?
Yeah.
Small changes to things like the Gmail app where swiping to archive an email are going to look better or have better physics. That's when you kind of get the understanding of, okay, Google's really onto something here. And I don't know, but I found these results on Search. Perfect.
Would not be an episode, of this podcast if you did not fire that smart speaker off.
I should always keep it unmuted because it's super fun.
Absolutely.
But to go back to like some thoughts around Google's apps and the experience. Google's in a lot of hot water right now from a regulatory perspective. The government is threatening to break the company up, separate Chrome into a different company. Google search is on the decline. Google may not be allowed to give Apple $20 billion a year to make Google search the default engine in Safari anymore, etc. But that puts even more value on Google's apps being really good and really performant and really beautiful across the board, right? If Google wants Gemini to be the default front end for your chatbot dreams, it has to actually feel like an experience worth diving into on the iPhone. Because eventually, maybe in 5 years, Siri will actually be usable. And that will always be available by just holding down the power button, right? So you're in this position where Google may not be the default search engine anymore in Safari. Siri's actually a decent product. You have to make the Google app and the Gemini app really, really good. The Gmail app slightly less terrible. And Google Maps not overrun with ads to the point where you go off and find something else to use, right? So like all of these little things add up to a big change in how people use their devices, not just on Android phones, and not just on, especially not on Pixels, which is where the impact is going to be felt, ironically, the least, even though it's coming before any other.
Yeah. Very quickly, speaking of missed Apple deadlines, did you see next gen Carplay is happening finally?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's got a new name.
Okay, hit me.
Carplay Ultra.
No, you're joking.
I'm not kidding. I'm not. I swear to God.
What?
It is launching first in new Aston Martin cars.
Aston Martin. Okay, good. So it's
4 people will have it,
affordable,
and then it is eventually coming to Hyundai and Kia vehicles too. But yeah, it's called CarPlay Ultra. It's just, what are we doing? It's speaking of cars, back to Android. Google is doing a thing that I asked for almost exactly a year ago, which is putting Gemini in Android Auto and then also Android automotive powered cars, or specifically automotive powered cars that have Google's app suite, which I think is a good idea. I thought it was a good idea a year ago when we had our briefing prior to Tuesday's broadcast of the I/O show. Or the Android show I/O edition. I asked if they were working on making Gemini's responses shorter, because as much as I think Gemini's improved language processing over Assistant will be really useful in a setting like the car, Gemini has a habit of just talking at you forever and giving long responses that are far more detailed than you probably need. And Google told me that yes, they are aware that that could be a distraction, and they are working on delivering shorter responses from Gemini within the car. So I'm actually really excited for that from an Android Auto perspective. I think that's kind of the killer app that will make, in my mind, Android Auto and CarPlay are fairly neck and neck in terms of features and usability. Those are both good platforms, and I do think that Gemini being there as opposed to Siri, which is awful in CarPlay, will absolutely make it the. Oh, I triggered Siri on an iPhone in my office. God fucking damn it. Sorry, Jules. We both. I'm as guilty as Daniel today. Anyway, I think it'll really boost Android Auto's usability just in general. I'm actually really excited for that.
Yeah. So one of the other announcements was obviously that Gemini is expanding everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So,
it's also TVs and watches and everywhere.
yeah, and that'll be coming later this year, along with Material 3 Expressive updates for Wear OS, specifically Wear OS 6 when it comes out later this year. And for a watch to get a big update like this is actually perhaps even more significant. Just the way that you use a watch. Like the Pixel Watch is, I think, the best Android Wear or Wear OS device on the market, but it's not information dense, right? And they haven't really optimized it for the round screen. Most apps don't take advantage of it, and I would say Wear OS 6 does a better job from just what I can see with that.
Yeah, I like all their little icons for contacts or artist pages in YouTube Music. It feels a little bit more like they are able to move information around dynamically and organically in order to make it fit a little bit better on a circular screen as opposed to just having a list.
Yeah, looks a little bit modular too, which I like.
Yeah. It's almost like quick settings, or like every page is like a widget, is like a series of widgets. It's really interesting, and I don't think we've really seen anything like this on a smartwatch before. I feel like a lot of modern smartwatch skins are very like, let's just pull inspiration from the Apple Watch. I reviewed the OnePlus Watch 3, which is a generally good watch, but like, its apps page is just the WatchOS app page, for example. And I think this is a good, again, like we are seeing Google kind of be the only modern OEM, if you want to call them that is like actively thinking about ways to design interfaces that aren't just like looking over Apple's shoulder and seeing what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, a couple other small things. Find My Device is now going to be called Find Hub because, as Google eloquently put it in the video, it's not just devices anymore that you're potentially looking for. The network ecosystem itself is a lot better than it was when it launched last year. And I would say, like, after a pretty rough few months, it's finally got an ecosystem of products. You can buy trackers that are both Apple and Google supported now in the same product. You can't have both networks activated at the same time, but I believe you can toggle between them in the settings, which I always found like the reason I wouldn't want to invest in one or the other is, if I have an iPad and an Android phone or whatever, a Mac and an Android phone, like which one do you choose?
Right.
And this, the fact that you can now have a single product that does both obviates the need to choose. You just buy that thing. They're a lot cheaper now, and they seem to be much more reliable too. Plus, they will support UWB on Android 16, which is excellent. So some nice updates there. And then there's a few kind of security things. Advanced protection mode gets a massive update in Android 16. It's basically going to be impossible for thieves to use a stolen phone once the deletion process is activated. There's just like a whole lot of stuff that Google is improving about its advanced protection mode in general. USB logging has been completely locked down to the point where, any unknown USB device is just like unable to read anything on the phone anymore.
Yeah.
It's going to not really impact most people, but anybody who wants advanced protection will be able to take advantage of this once Android 16 rolls out. And for people who need it, like this is a big deal. So it's nice to see.
One final thing that we caught while we were reviewing the information that was spoken about during our Q&A session, one of the product leads at Google let it slip to us that Android 16 QPR 1, Beta 1, or whatever they end up calling it is coming at the end of this month, right before Android 16 goes stable. So whatever that second big update in the second half of the year is going to be, we're going to start seeing previews of it. That's where you will start seeing Material 3 Expressive appear. We do not have to wait that long to start seeing Material 3 Expressive in action on actual devices if you're willing to run beta software.
I'm pretty excited about that because the QPR betas are pretty stable for the most part.
Yeah, they're a lot more fun too, if that makes any sense. Like a lot of times they're kind of what Android betas used to feel like, where like if you're excited about trying out new features, they're actually probably going to be in the QPR betas, not like the Android 14, 15, 16, 17 betas. Like that's where you're going to find, larger, more user facing changes a lot of the time, or new features, especially for Pixel users. So yeah, if you've been dying to jump on a new Android beta, it sounds like it's coming at the end of the month.
I'm actually going to do that. I think because the Material 3 Expressive
same
changes are going to emerge first in that beta, I think I'm going to install it on my Pixel.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay. Was there anything else about the Android show that you wanted to mention?
To kind of bring it full circle, I think this is a really smart thing to do ahead of I/O next week. Last year's I/O, and I say this as someone who's sitting in the stands watching it, felt really disjointed and constantly kind of bounced back and forth between dev-facing features and user-facing features and AI and not AI and AI, and then it was like, okay, we have this 10-minute window for Android, and then we're going back to Gemini. And I think just being like, you know what, Android gets its own thing. It's technically not during I/O, but I/O's later this year, so it's kind of during when I/O would usually be anyway. I think that was like a smart move on Google's part to allow Android and Material 3 Expressive in particular to have its own space to shine, and then we could move on to Gemini next week. Or if you don't care about Gemini, like you got your announcement, like you can bounce. I think that was a smart decision, and if this is what I/O looks like going forward, where it's primarily AI focused, because Google as a company is primarily AI focused now, I hope they keep this sort of setup moving forward.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like Android has not been front and center at I/O for many years, and just to acknowledge that explicitly now by breaking it out, and the fact that it was only 20 minutes is funny, right? Because it means typically, like at an I/O keynote back in the day, Android would take up an hour, if not more. Now it's relegated to its own thing, 20 minutes. It's barely a blip, and I don't know. I mean, Android is the biggest mobile operating system in the world, but like it's not really a revenue driver for Google in a direct sense. And it's so mature now that they don't really need to harp on much of it anymore. You know what gets Google better headlines these days? AI podcasts, right? Like who knew that when they announced Project Notebook, which is now Notebook LLM, it would turn into like one of the bigger news stories of the year.
Yeah. We should say that we have been Notebook LM for 5 or 6 months now.
LM,
we're not even
LLM. That's true. We're not actually real.
This.
We're avatars that are that are projected.
That's interesting, Daniel. And here's another they have the same cadence every time, but I'm sure they'll improve it. But it is funny that if you listen to more than 2 of them, you start noticing all the same vocal tics in the AI generated voices. It's funny.
Yeah, that is interesting because when you think about a camel's hump, you really have to think deep about it. And
tell me more.
It's so good. It's so good. I just think, the future of podcasts is nobody actually doing the podcasting. Who needs people when you have camel humps?
Yeah, I definitely don't think of podcasts as one of the most like intimate forms of like media you can create these days where you have all of these like parasocial relationships with the voices that are literally in your head. Just make it all AI. I that sounds a little cynical. I think this tool has its place, but I also think that anybody who thinks it's going to replace like actual podcasts is incorrect.
There's been a couple of really good long form articles and some good reporting done this past couple of weeks about how AI is just like upending education, particularly
Yeah.
university education. There was
Yeah.
a report in, I think it was the New York Mag,
Hmm.
that went over how many kids are cheating using
Dire. It was a dire
ChatGPT.
article.
It's
It
like
made me feel
80% of kids have
bummed
admitted to
out.
using ChatGPT to cheat in some form.
Yeah. And then there was one like yesterday, was it the Times or there was one that was like, yeah, here's a story about professors using it and like how students are mad that professors are using it. It's just like it's like okay, so like everybody's mad at everybody for using it at all times. Ugh, it sounds like a mess. I am thankful I am not involved in a school setting in any way because it sounds like a nightmare to be both a student or a teacher at this point.
Exactly. I don't really understand like how you teach a course anymore if you can't take for granted that the kids are actually doing the work.
Listen, I might have went to college in the mid 2010s, but I was still buying those blue books from my university
Yeah, you
bookstore. Bring
cheat like a real person.
yeah, by scrolling through Google Keep on your Moto 360 as I established last week.
Amazing. That's a brilliant way of cheating, let's be honest.
Listen.
Okay, so let's talk about the S25 Edge for like 3 minutes. So the phone we knew, I mean, it's out, people have it.
Mhm.
It's $1,100. I, I think like the predominant reaction to this has been why?
Mhm.
Like why
Well, we
is
know
it
why. It's actually interesting that why is one of the answers we do have for this phone, which is that they want to beat Apple to market with whatever the iPhone 17 Air or whatever they end up calling it is. They want to be there first. But any interest I had in this phone really went out the window when I realized, and it was Michael Fisher, who I think is listening to this right now, probably. And if it's like last time, he will text me to say, thanks for the shout out. And I will say, I don't remember what you're referencing, but you're welcome. Uh, Michael Fisher pointed out that like 2015's original Moto Z, the first modular phone Moto made with Moto mods, was thinner,
yes.
was a slimmer smartphone. So like I can't even be that impressed that you built this. Like it's not, and then you factor in the two cameras with no telephoto and it tops out at a 10x digital zoom. So if anything is farther than 10x, sorry. The battery is 3900 milliamps. Like I don't know who this is for. It is otherwise essentially just an S25 plus and that phone is $100 cheaper, but comes with a more fully featured camera package and a larger battery, and it's slightly thicker, but it's not that much thicker. And same with the weight, right? Like, yes, the S25 Edge is 160, it's 163 grams, which is about the weight of
The
the
S25.
S25
Yeah.
and a little bit lighter than like the iPhone 16. But like it's still going to feel big in your pocket because it's a big smartphone. It's a 6.7-inch display. Like it's not going to feel small. I don't know who this is for, and the lack of interest online has me just like stumped. Like you read through Michael Fisher, who got a hands on, and I should say we did not get a hands on. We were not invited. You read through Michael Fisher's tweet that he posted, or I think it was on all of his social media, so it was Instagram, Threads, whatever you want. But you read through it, and he's like stumped as to what this is for, and I'm right there with him. Like I really think that this is Samsung hitting rock bottom in terms of its creativity and originality. Like if this is the big bold idea coming out of Samsung, this company is in trouble.
Straight up. I think the admission of just complete cultural vacuousness here is remarkable. Just coming out with a thin phone is not in and of itself a laudable achievement. This is something we knew Samsung could do. Samsung, we've never criticized Samsung on its ability to create solid, reliable hardware. You know,
I think most OEMs could do this. I don't think what stops most OEMs from making a 5.7 millimeter phone or 5.8 millimeter phone is that it's hard. I mean, I'm sure it's got its challenges, but like, I trust that companies like OnePlus and Google could do this, and Apple is going to do this, right? Like, there's been way too many leaks about that phone for it to not be real.
But Apple, like, the thing is, Apple will have a story to tell, right? Whether it is believable. I'm not defending that.
Go ahead.
I'm not defending this assumed iPhone 17 Air story, right?
Yes.
But Apple alone has the ability to create cultural impact out of pieces of technology that don't deserve it, right?
True.
The AirPods,
I'll agree with that. Yeah,
are not better than, or weren't in 2016 better than the alternatives, but Apple made it possible through its ecosystem, blah, 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 right? I was just joking with one of my colleagues today about how you go to a gym and everybody's wearing AirPods Max.
Yeah.
First, like, why would you take these $550 headphones to the gym?
Because people think they look cool, because they're a status symbol.
The fact that they're made by Apple reinforces, I mean, there's only so much leniency Apple can be granted, right? Like, I don't know if you saw the Price is Right clip with the Vision Pro.
I did, yes, which is...
we'll link to it in the show.
And Jules, you should just drop the audio here, because you do not need to see the visual.
$1,270.
$1,270. Good luck, everybody. Actual retail price is $3,499. Maria,
you know, fair. That is probably the max a mixed reality headset should be to be reasonably priced for normal people to buy it. And it is, you know, it is funny because I had the thought of like watching this. I was like, you know, if they put an iPhone or an Apple Watch up there, I think these people would probably have a pretty good idea what it would cost. And it's hilarious that almost a year and a half into this thing being on the market, not even announced, but on the market, nobody has a clue what you need to spend to buy a Vision Pro, because nobody's buying them.
But nobody knows what it is, more importantly. Like,
well, that too.
If you were to ask a random person on the street what an iPad costs, they would be able to guess, right?
They'd be like, I don't know, what, $400 or $500, and we'd be like, yeah, pretty much. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
I would say if you asked a random person what a Meta Quest 3 costs, most people would have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
And it comes down
to,
they
might guess, I don't know, $600, and they'd be about right? And then you watch these guys guess $1,000, and they're $2,500 off.
Nobody knows what a VR headset is yet. Like, they don't know Apple created a VR headset. They don't know that VR has its own sort of ecosystem. Anyway, that's a complete sidebar, but
tangents on this podcast.
I don't even know where we were before this rant, to be honest. I'm so hot that I'm barely able to conform.
Hot. I'm sweating so much right now.
We need to end the show just so that I can dunk my head in a bucket of ice water or take
the S25 Edge. Let's pull it.
Oh yeah, the S25 Edge. Okay. I genuinely forgot about this phone. Like, I did not, it was like completely went out of my mind. I had nothing else to say about it.
I'll let people in, and behind the curtain, our producer, our wonderful producer Jules, is on vacation this week, and I told him he should not interrupt his vacation to be the producer on air, so he's not watching us right now as he usually is. And he was like, okay, cool, just make sure you guys talk about the Android show and the and Edge. And I, for 20 seconds, was like, was there browser news I missed? Like, what's up with Microsoft Edge? Like, for much longer than it should have been, considering I wrote the news article about this phone. Like, I spent 2 hours on Monday, like, drafting this news article and putting all the specs in our CMS and uploading the images. And 2 days later, I was like, the what? I don't know what you're talking about. That I'm unfamiliar. You mean Microsoft's browser? And I think that's a problem. And you had like a similar reaction when we were talking before the show today, where it's like, oh right, like that thing. Like, who cares? And I don't think $1,100 is like a dumb amount of money in the same way that I kind of think $1,300 for the Razer Ultra is a dumb amount of money. But I still think anybody considering this phone would be better off like taking the extra 30 grams in weight to get a much larger battery and a better camera system on the S25 Plus. Like, this is not going to be a particularly good phone just based on like its size constraints and limitations. And yeah, that's kind of where I am on this phone, having not used it because Samsung was very limited in who they invited to these hands-on events ahead of launch. But it's odd. It's an odd phone, and I know we have been particularly brutal on Samsung over the past 18 months on this podcast, but I think it's been earned. Like, I really think that this company needs to fully reevaluate what its goals are. Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, that said, the S25 series has sold pretty well.
I know. And that's because they're reliable phones, and Samsung has an ecosystem and is a known brand, and there aren't that many Android brands left in the US specifically, and they're not bad phones. They're just not particularly impressive phones. But if you had an S20 or a Note 10, the S25 series is like a perfectly good upgrade for you. Like, you're not, just because they're not exciting or whatever doesn't mean you're going to have like a bad time. But I don't know if that will carry over to this specific product. I think this one has enough shortcomings on paper. Having not used the phone, I can just tell you, people will struggle to get through a day on this battery. It's just not going to happen. Just like mathematically. We should. I also want to point out this really quickly, is that it seems like the response from people who did get a hands-on with this were so tepid. The mood was so tepid that Samsung Mobile on Twitter retweeted a tweet from Marquez Brownlee promoting his hands-on video with it, which included the phrase "nobody is asking for super thin phones, here we are," as like a promotion, right? Like, they tweeted, "Beyond Slim may surprise, but power comes in all shapes." And it's like, did you guys I know Marquez is popular, but did you guys retweet this? Because it was also kind of the only very popular tech YouTuber who, it was like, this was the most positive tweet. It kind of seems that way. Very bad marketing is what I would say.
I would say the reason our site didn't get an invite is particularly because Samsung is marketing this to influencers.
Yes.
And
yeah, it was a lot of video creators, it seemed like, who primarily got,
because it's a beautiful looking item, like as an item.
But oh my god, they couldn't even do fun colors. It's the same colors.
But it's like, also made with titanium, so I don't. Anyway,
great.
I think the whole thing about this is that it's once again just very confusing to look at a company like Samsung and understand what its goals are in 2025 and beyond.
Absolutely.
Because hardware is not growing anymore. And, if Samsung goes the way of LG, which it won't, but LG is in a much better place right now by just making televisions and washing machines, right? Like, getting out of the phone market, to our chagrin, was the best thing that LG could have done. Did you know that Sony launched a new phone this week?
I did, but like,
it did, and it made exactly zero impression on anybody, right? Yeah. Like, this is another example of how the market has consolidated so much that the interest in the most popular two brands in the world has waned to the point where it's hard to make any impact. Like, as journalists covering these launches, it is hard to make anybody care about them anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And this brings me to the Razr Ultra. So let's just talk about the Razr Ultra for like 5 minutes.
Well, before we get there, what I wanted to say real quick is the response we've seen to that, right? Is all of these companies are now, and you can, I mean, Apple is the key example of this, is they're all services companies now, right? Which is why Apple is fighting so hard to keep that 27% or to keep as much revenue within the App Store as it can, which is why I want to float to you an idea, and I maybe you can help me get in touch with someone at Samsung who can make this happen. I think it's time to bring back Samsung Milk Music.
Agreed. Well, I completely agree.
Never been a better time.
I would spend $20 a month,
absolutely, to
have a music streaming service called Milk Music.
Do you think we can do what people did for Morbius? Remember when Morbius got like a re-release back in theaters and it bombed a second time? Do you think we can do that for Milk Music, where we're like, no, Samsung, we want it now. We'll sign up for Milk Music. Just bring it back.
I think the problem with that idea is that Samsung is so creatively bankrupt that all it would do is white label Spotify and call it something else.
You're forgetting this was already a white label. It was Slacker. It was Slacker Radio.
Yeah, no, I know. But does Slacker exist anymore?
It
sure doesn't.
I don't believe it does. No, it does not. In fact, if you click Slacker Radio in Wikipedia, it redirects you to Live One, formerly known as Live X Live. Unclear about any of this. So
yeah. I actually, for a minute, enjoyed Slacker Radio.
So did I.
It was one of the few free streaming services that had a good mix of ad-supported radio, and you could listen to a certain amount of ad-free music, if I recall.
Yeah, I remember liking it more, in the like late aughts, like early, probably more just like late aughts. But like I remember liking it more than Pandora at the time, and. But, we're in a very different place for music streaming. Okay, let's quickly talk about the Razr Ultra.
Okay, please. So you have one.
I do. I have it right here.
So tell us about, the review embargo lifted today.
Yes.
Tell us what your first week of using the device was like.
It felt like another one of these. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the problem with it, where it felt a lot, it's a more like last year's phones. It's refined. It's a more refined device compared to its predecessor. Not that this one has a direct predecessor, but compared to like the Razr and the Razr Plus of last year. And I think that's good. There are things to like about this phone. It's the best hinge Motorola's built yet. The design is slight, the edges are a little flatter, but still kind of curved, so it's comfortable in your hand. I mostly like the wood design on the model I have. I actually really like the brushed bronze frame. The wood itself, I'm hit or miss on. I can't really decide. I just keep going back and forth on whether I like it or not. The cover display, brighter than ever. It's great outdoors. It's as usable as it was previously. The main display is too tall.
It's too big.
It's too big.
It's my main criticism of this phone.
Yeah.
Because even though it's 7 inches, it's physically the same size as the Razr Plus from last year. It's just the borders around the screen are slightly slimmer. Yeah. So you get a point of an inch of more usable space. But like every time I open this phone, I'm like, this is too tall.
It's just based on feel. I think it's, and I reviewed the regular Razr last year. I did not review the Plus, so maybe that's skewing this. But because this obviously has bigger and better sensors in it than the Razr 2024, the regular Razr, it's really top heavy when it's open.
Oh,
so it's not just that it's tall. It feels like it wants to fall out of my hand every time I'm typing. It's kind of not comfortable to use. And so you end up using it closed a lot, which is not terrible, but not every app works particularly well on the cover screen. You're going to want, you don't want to have long texting conversations just on the cover screen. Again, it's like the price becomes a problem because I don't know what you're paying for. You're paying $1,300, but you can get a much better smartphone camera. If all you want is a smartphone camera, you can get a much better one for $1,300. You can go buy a Pixel 9 Pro or a 9 Pro XL or wait for the 10 series in 2 months, 3 months. If you want a big screen for gaming, like, sure, this has a Snapdragon 8 Elite in it. I'm glad Motorola finally decided to put an actual flagship processor in one of their flip phones, which they haven't done before. But what is it there for, right? Because it's like the AI skills are on the basic Razor this year, so it's not really needed for that. And then you can say gaming, but this is not a comfortable aspect ratio to game in. I don't want to play Balatro on this, let alone Genshin Impact or they announced that Persona Gotcha game is coming to the US. I'm not going to want to play it on here. So it becomes a problem where it's like I'm just kind of paying for style, which you the listener might be okay with, but it's not a good value. It's not like a bad phone by any means, but it's a bad value. And that's before we even get into the software update side where this is only going to get 3 OS upgrades. And again, for $1,300, I struggle to recommend that. I would, if you're interested in this, I would point you towards the $700, it's $700, right? $700 regular Razor. Like, I think that's going to get you what you want while saving you, cutting the price in half, basically. And the only thing you're really going to sacrifice is camera quality. But I don't think this camera's like perfect. The processing can be kind of weird sometimes, and it's okay, but like you're missing a telephoto, much like the Edge, and so I think if you're into this style of phone, I would kind of look pretty closely at the base model. I would not look at the Plus because this year's Plus is just last year's Plus. If you want that, buy last year's, on discount. But yeah, that's kind of my review in a nutshell. And it's a bit of a bummer because the last 2 years I've been really excited about Motorola's Razr phones, and just the price tag kind of drags this one down for me.
It's disappointing, but also not. Like, a slightly better Razr Plus, in my opinion, is still the best flip phone you can buy.
Yeah, I think this probably is the best flip phone you can buy. Like I don't think I have to think that hard about it, but I don't know. It becomes difficult at this price. Although I do appreciate that it starts at 512 gigabytes of storage. I can see the value you're getting for your money there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm still holding out hope that if and when I get one, I will love it as much as I love the Razr Plus or even more. But
people seem a lot hotter on it than I am generally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think like you're also not like a foldable guy in general.
But I do like clamshells more than book style foldables. And I really liked both the 2023 Razr Plus and last year's regular Razr. So I'm not recommending a non-Motorola phone. I'm saying Motorola has a better value proposition for you when you look down market. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, that's all right. I guess
I've bummed Daniel out. He's like,
I'm kind of disappointed.
I had my credit card out. I was going to put my information. I'm on the Motorola
the other thing
website.
too is like nobody should buy this at full price, right? This is not going to stay $1,300 for long.
That's the other thing.
Motorola will inevitably discount this to under $1,000 within a few months. Like my bet, and here's my bet is that this will be $1,000 on Prime Day. So that's only 2 months.
I agree with that, but much like when I review a Pixel, I have to, which does the same thing. I have to review it based on the MSRP and not. It'll probably be on sale. Like I can mention that, but like my final judgment kind of has to be assuming you are going to spend full price on this, either divided up via carrier sales or carrier plans, or I don't know. It's complicated.
No, I completely agree.
Smartphone is complicated.
I'm just saying, like, it's probably going to be a better deal once we get past that point.
Absolutely. Can't get a word. Actually, I lied. It could become a worse deal if Tariff Madness happens again. I know we're in a weird place right now, but who knows? Who knows?
Last thing, let's quickly talk about this ridiculous Uber announcement. I was kind of half joking when I said I wanted to spend an hour talking about this, but so prior to the pandemic, Uber Share was a big deal, right? I used it all the time, where you would basically share a ride with somebody going in the same general direction, and the cost of your ride would be very, very low, much lower than a single ride. And like that basically disappeared over the pandemic, and it never really came back. You can still do it, and some people do, but it's never regained that same kind of cultural cachet as it did prior to the pandemic. But now Uber is launching something called Route Share, which is basically a bus route, but for cars. People can volunteer, I guess, like drivers can volunteer to run this route route if you're listening to us down south. And it's basically like Uber Pool, but it goes in a particular direction. It follows a specific path and then it turns around and comes back. And you're expected to save up to 50% compared to a regular UberX. And Uber is saying that this is like an in-between step between UberX and public transit. But given the fact that public transit systems are experiencing massive deficits at the moment, and that it's so difficult to get the government to invest in public transit in big cities around the world, this just screams to me like another naked opportunity seen by private companies or corporations basically to just roll over the grave of something that is already being underrepresented by something that should be run by the government.
And it's like, okay, so like Uber comes in and they flip the table on the taxi industry. And it's like, well, nobody likes taxis very much, right? And Uber, at the very least, like kind of match taxi pricing, if not would often beat it. That might not be true anymore, but it was for a time, and it was easier, and it was in some ways safer and in some ways not, but like there were obvious benefits. Putting aside the problems with funding public transit, like I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, so I'm still paying like, you know, in the example in this Verge article I'm looking at, which is taking us through Manhattan, which is hilarious because like there are other ways to get around Manhattan, but you know, it's like, okay, so I'm going to use what is essentially a privatized bus, and instead of paying $40 for an UberX, I'm going to pay $20 for Uber's bus. But if I were to take public transit or the subway, both of which are options in New York City, like I'm not paying $20. Like I'm paying significantly less than $20. And that's a lot of money to, you know, if they were like, it's $5, you get on and you ride till you have to get off. Like, sure. And even then it also involves walking to a specific location. They're not going to grab you. It's not like a normal Uber. They're not going to grab you from the restaurant you're leaving. You have to go meet them at the pickup. And I just, man, I don't get it.
Like, what is the capacity? Are we talking about? Like, are they?
Is this a minivan?
Are they SUVs? Are they like white buses? Or are they just people's cars with a maximum of 4 people?
Am I piling 20 people in a Prius? Like, what are we like a Honda Civic?
Like a clown
what are
car?
we doing?
I mean, that's the thing, right? To make this affordable, the idea is that you fill up the vehicle, and the more people in the vehicle, the cheaper the ride.
Yeah.
Right? That's the whole idea behind public transit. If this is still using private cars, it's maybe making things a little bit more efficient by removing a couple of Uber X's off the road.
Sure.
But like, it does not actually fill a vacuum that a well-funded public transit system is designed to fill. Like, especially a city like New York, which has among the best public transit systems in the world, where there's a subway stop or bus stop throughout the entire 5 boroughs. Like, it is not difficult to get around New York City, period.
I was there a few weeks ago for the Motorola Razr event, and in the afternoon after work, I went on like a long walk from where we were staying, and I think we were in Midtown. I'd have to look up what block we were on. I don't remember anymore. But I spent like 35 or 40 minutes walking north up to and then into and through part of Central Park. And I passed like, in addition to a countless buses, like 6 or 7 subway stops that I could have got on if I didn't want to walk anymore, right? And I was doing it to go for a walk, but it's so funny that this is like the example they're using. I also want to call attention to, okay, so what I want to say is that this is a sign of a company that needs to keep growing at infinite rates, right? It can't stop growing. It needs to constantly be generating new revenue, and so therefore it needs to come up with new ways to bring in quote unquote like cheaper opportunities for people to spend money in the app, because maybe they can't afford an UberX but they can afford route share. And I'm going to quote from Uber's product chief, who told The Verge, or maybe said it during their product event, I'm not sure which, people are feeling more and more uncertain. They're seeing prices go up in different realms of their life, and that is definitely generating some anxiety. And it's like, Uber, you guys have raised your prices. You're the thing you're talking about. Like, Uber used to be cheap. Like, even in places like this sounds so diminishing of Buffalo. I'm allowed to be diminishing of Buffalo. Even in smaller metro areas like Buffalo, like, I've watched Uber and Lyft prices go up where it's like, I used to be able to get downtown and back like 13, 14 bucks each way. Now it's like $28. Daniel, do you know what I do when I go downtown to like a sporting event? I just drive now and I don't drink. I just stay sober for the evening and then I drive home because it's just like, it's not that I can't even afford it. It's that it's a waste of money. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to spend $60 so that I can go spend $20 per beer at a sporting event. I'll just drive. And I know not everybody, obviously that doesn't apply to people who don't have their own car, but you're pricing people out and then trying to come back and being like, don't worry, we have new options for you. You can strap yourself to the top of this, CRV and we will get you there. And it's like, that's miserable. And all you're doing is reinventing a thing that already exists.
You said it perfectly. All right, let's. I
would love to know. Also, we should say HBO Max is back. That's all I wanted to say.
I love
speaking
it.
Of weird,
the best
bullshit.
thing. Okay, that actually brings me to that's a good transition to the end of the show because I wanted to talk about what's making you happy this week.
Sure.
And I have one that's directly related to what you just mentioned. So,
okay,
but you go first. What's making you happy this week?
Well, to follow up on last week, I was totally right about Guitar Hero. I was totally right about that controller. Maddie and I spent like all weekend just like, first we were just downloading, sorry, not downloading. We were ripping ROMs legally, ISO files legally from legally owned copies of Guitar Hero and Rock Band for PS2. Then we set up Clone Hero and realized that there are some real sickos, and I say that positively, on the internet, who have built entire spreadsheets of where you can download the entire song packs for most Rock Band and Guitar Hero songs. Daniel, I'm going to send you this on Slack. Look at how disgusting this is. This is crazy. Look at this thing.
I'm opening that. Oh my God.
These are all song packs, like zipped files that you can download and just import into Clone Hero. And then you essentially have every Guitar Hero and Rock Band song plus like user generated content in Clone Hero.
Oh my God. This
is all I'm doing now. This is just my life now.
Okay. I'm going to have to talk to you about this after. I'm going to need this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm cheating a little bit by doing it 2 weeks in a row, but this is what we did this weekend. I'll celebrate this as well. We haven't done this yet, but our local indie theater, the North Park Theater in Buffalo, recently crowdfunded their way to a upgraded 4K laser projector, right? Their projector was on its way out, starting to die. They raised money to buy a brand new top of the line projector and installed it, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. And since then they've been, in addition to new releases, like they've been showing the new Cronenberg movie, they've also been getting their hands on like older film, like they did like Lord of the Rings for a couple days, right? Where they were just showing off, come see a relatively cheap movie on like our new projector and like a throwback movie. For the next week, they're doing Blade Runner, and Maddie and I are going to go see Blade Runner in a theater, which I've never done, in like this new beautiful 4K projector they have. I'm very excited.
Amazing. I love it. Such a good
What's
movie.
making you happy?
So going back to your HBO is becoming HBO, or Max is becoming HBO Max again.
Yes.
I just finished the James Gandolfini biography by Jason Bailey called Gandolfini.
I've heard it's good.
It's really good. And I knew some about his life, and
he was a pretty private guy
in
general.
Yeah, this is a really well reported book with a lot of first party sources or primary sources that are willing to talk to him in pretty significant detail. Like, this is not the only Gandolfini biography written so far, but it's the one that has the most primary sources. And it's just a testament to Bailey's like reputation. He's a biographer, a historian. He's a fan. Like you can tell that he lauds Gandolfini's work throughout the book in like a really honest and I would say sincere way, and without being fawning, right? He doesn't gloss over the guy's troubles, and there were many, but he had a really interesting life. And I didn't know much about his non-Sopranos filmography before this book. And like, what's really interesting about it is that he wasn't in a lot of great movies, but he was the best part of a lot of pretty bad movies.
Absolutely.
And it goes to show that like, even as somebody who was as respected as him, it's hard to get leading roles when you kind of look that way, right? And he was so insecure about his looks and his talent, and he was just like a very insecure person who never really understood how brilliant he was. And I'm rewatching The Sopranos right now, and it's incredible to see it again after so many years.
It's so good. There's nothing else like it. It's one of a kind. There are plenty of shows trying to be it, but there is only one Sopranos. I love that show so much.
But it's also like it took such a toll on him.
Yeah.
And you really feel for him after reading this book, just like how hard it was to play a guy like Tony Soprano for what, 8 years?
8 years, yeah, basically.
And like, there's also this understanding that David Chase, the showrunner, had a specific vision, and Gandolfini didn't agree with that vision a lot of the time.
Right.
And butted up against Chase way more often than I knew previously. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's a really good read. And there's a lot of other stuff around The Sopranos, right? Like there's been a lot of chronicling of like the way The Sopranos was made, but it doesn't come at it from a Gandolfini first perspective.
Right.
Matt Zoller Seitz, I think, is he wrote like the definitive book about The Sopranos.
Yes.
But I would say this is probably the definitive biography for James Gandolfini, and it's definitely worth a read.
The Soprano Sessions. That's it.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. With Alan Sepinwall as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's what's making me happy this week. Even though it's not a happy book. Obviously, James Gandolfini tragically died of a heart attack in 2013, but it's a celebration of his life. And it's I don't love actor biographies generally. Like celebrity lives are not that interesting.
No, but it depends on who it, like there are celebrities. It's like him and another actor who passed months later, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Those are the types of people that I want to like dive into their life and like learn more about. It's tragic, but they're like,
it's funny you mentioned Philip Seymour Hoffman, because the second I finished this book, I looked up whether there was a definitive biography of Philip Seymour Hoffman because of that exact reason. I was like, he's somebody who's similar to Gandolfini in that he's so talented and so chameleonic that I absolutely know nothing about his personal life.
Yeah. Oh, oh man, I miss both of those actors so much. Like it's been over a decade, and it's still, there will be those times you'll watch something with either of them in it, and you'll be like, we missed out on so many more great performances from them.
Yeah. So this show is dedicated to James Gandolfini and Philip Seymour Hoffman. And you, this is also dedicated to you. So I'm going to open the floor. We'll end with an announcement.
Sure. I am leaving Android Police effective next Friday, which is 8 days away as we record this. So that means I'm leaving the show as well, which I wanted, before in the pre-show, we were talking about whether to talk about it this week or next week. And if I were listening to this show, I would want to know immediately how it was changing or whatever. And so, and I can't tell you that as so much as I can just tell you that I won't be on it. But, yeah, I can't speak quite yet to what's next for me. I would suggest following me on social media wherever, even though I have been trying not to use it. I guess I need to change that. But yeah, I'm leaving Android, please.
That's really shitty for me personally. It's a real bummer for me personally, but I'm glad.
It's a bit of a bummer. It's very bittersweet for me. You know, this place gave me and you, Daniel, gave me a lot of opportunities and has certainly changed my life forever. I've been here for a little over 4 years.
That's
you know,
crazy.
First as a freelance writer, then you hired me. It was like, was I the first person you technically hired as like a full-time staffer? Because you hired me like 2 weeks after you started as EIC.
Worst decision I ever made.
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, I was like, that's way too nice for Daniel. Worst decision you've ever made, absolutely. And then you and James promoted me to phones editor in August of 2022, and that's what I've been ever since. And yeah, it's time for something a little fresh, a new chapter. But I don't think this certainly won't be the last time you hear me on a microphone. You cannot keep me away from a microphone. I love podcasting so much. It truly has been a passion of mine forever, and I will not stop doing it. You can't make me stop doing it. And until Notebook LM replaces us all, and in which case I will have to stop.
So as of next week, will be replaced by an AI version of Will.
There's enough. How long have I been on this show? There's enough audio that you could just rebuild me and just have me spit out opinions that are a little bit too negative, you know?
So just to kind of close that, this show will not be the same without you, which means that there will not be a show at the end of your tenure. So next week will be the final Android Police show for the foreseeable future. This does not mean the podcast is dead, but I have decided that without Will as a permanent co-host, there's no real replacement. I'm not just going to like find somebody else to pick up the co-hosting duties. So I'm going to stop recording next week after next week's show. There will be a hiatus. I don't know how long it will be. I will make an announcement about the future of the AP podcast at some point, but it does not make sense for me to continue it without Will. And I mean, I would just spend the whole time crying anyway, so it's not going to be enjoyable to listen to. But in all honesty, like, I think that your leaving is the right time to end the show anyway. I think it's been an amazing experience for both of us, but it's also very obvious that like we would have needed to change the format in some form eventually.
Yeah. Go back and listen to this episode again. The episode you just listened to. Go back and hear us talk about like smartphones.
Yeah. So I just think it's probably a perfect time to reevaluate the purpose of the Android Police podcast. But anyway, I think like we'll talk more about it next week, but for everybody who has listened to this show over the last few years, I cannot say how thankful I am and we are to you. Yeah. Like, you've kept us going, your emails, your so eloquent tweets evaluating our performance. Yeah, it's been a gratifying experience. And just
I mean, how many times have you and I told each other that this is our favorite part of the job?
It is. It's 100% our favorite part.
Yeah, we love doing this. Like, we did this because nobody made us do this. If anything, it was the opposite. You know, which, Jules, you can cut that if you want. But you know, it's kind of true. Like this was a passion project for sure. There will be other outlets that you can find both Daniel and I. It won't be done. But
yeah, I mean, that's also another thing that I will talk about in the future, right? You're not going to be at AP anymore, but we'll figure something out. There's no question that you and I will record something together again. It just won't be affiliated with AP.
Yeah, I guess we should. I mean, and Daniel, if you don't want me to say this, we can cut it, or Jules can cut it. But you and I have been talking about like what we want to make next, and it will be an independent venture of some kind, and
yes, and it won't be tech related, and
it won't be tech related, but
it will have our charming chemistry.
it might be healthy a little bit for it to not be tech related, is all I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
it might be a good thing to breathe a little bit outside of this zone, I think.
I think that's the right way to look at it.
So maybe more on that next week, maybe not, and if not, then we'll certainly talk about it on our social platforms, or I'll just start. I'll get a blowhorn. I'll drive around Blues Brothers style and just shout it out in the streets where you can find whatever we're doing next. But yeah, I'm really excited. Like, I don't know exactly what the next few months of my life are going to be. Like, I don't, but that's cool. I don't know. I'm excited. Like, I'm turning 30 in August, and it feels like the right time to be like, okay, let me take like a big risk and a big swing and do some new stuff, do some new creative stuff, because I have, I like writing, but I also like podcasting, and I have a video production degree I should use maybe. And, it's going to be fun. So, we'll do more plugs and where you can find us next week, but we do have one more show, right? Like, that's going to be fun. And it's going to be IO themed, and we'll cover whatever is talked about at IO.
Yeah, it's going to be a good week to end things, because it'll be
so.
full of ways to make fun of Google. So that's how we
make fun of whoever they get for the opening act this year.
Exactly. All right, that's it for this week, though. Thank you for listening. Send your feedback, podcast@androidpolice.com, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.